David, how are with the coronavirus and everything going on? We had to check out with one of our favorite neighbors. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing so far so good. I haven't been out of the house except for walking the dog for almost 2 weeks now. And walking the dog and getting the mail. And
Wow.
I've been staying inside, catching up on correspondence, catching up on reading, catching up on house cleaning. And my wife, by the way, is stuck in Mexico because our doctor advised her not to fly because if she does, she might be at risk for getting the flu, the virus, or a bad cold, or a combination of all. And she has problems with getting a bad bronchitis if she gets a cold. So he said, do not take a chance. So she's there for at least another month.
Oh,
So
my.
I'm here with our 200-pound dog, Bear's his name, and he's enjoying, he's you can't see him, but he's on the floor behind me, fast asleep, not a care in the world, and all this chaos is whirling about us, and he's oblivious. Isn't that nice to have to be that way, be in that position?
Being that you are home alone, we actually have we have some of our friends that are experiencing the same thing. They are by themselves.
Uh-huh.
How are you getting through the boredom and things like that? What do you do for your day?
I friends call. I have all the kids. We have 3 children, and our daughter calls and FaceTimes, and then our son is in Canada. He calls. They haven't FaceTime yet, and my son, as I think I mentioned to you earlier, just had their first baby. He and his wife's name is Jessie, and our son is 2 days old now. So I've been dealing with that too. I'm not allowed to go into the hospital. No one was. And I can't go to their house to see them because they advised not to. No visitors. And that's fine with me. Keep them safe. So I've been very busy. And plus, since the movies have come out, the documentary and the Tom Hanks movie on Fred Rogers, I've been getting a lot of mail. Here, they've got my address somehow, and then the office sends me mail too. And they're wonderful letters. They're not just send me your picture, they're that too. But it's also letters about how much the movie has brought back all of these memories of watching Mr. Rogers. And I get all of these very poignant letters, and you just can't answer them with, hi, how are you? Thanks for your letter. Here's your picture. You really have to put some thought into it. So I'm getting caught up on those. So far, boredom has not set in. And I'm an avid television viewer. I'm an avid old movie viewer, as we've talked before. And I pull out some DVDs and watch those. And I'll turn television on once in a while and see what's going on. And so far, I guess it's an advantage of being an only child. I grew up as an only child, and I was never lonely. I don't remember ever being lonely. I always had ways to amuse myself. And then I had friends who lived nearby. So in a way, I cherish being alone for a while. I don't mind that. It doesn't bother me. It never has. But I know people who like to have input all the time too. I can understand that too. I can understand both ends of it. So being an only child helps in these times of quarantine.
There's something that I think is just remarkable about you, David, and that is you mentioned that when people write you, you handwrite them. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen it. You sit there and with your stationery and you handwrite them. Do you think that with all of this social distancing that we're doing and the people that are not being able to be, right there face to face with each other, do you think that we're craving more of that, more of the deep and simple, just kind of communication with each other?
It is plain and simple. You said pure and simple. You said
well, we like to
you're
use
quoting Fred.
We use deep and simple.
Deep and simple. That's it. Deep and simple. Pure and simple is close, but
oh yeah.
Deep and simple. That Fred came. That was, if you wanted to use two words of his communication, it's deep and simple. Especially with children, that describes the program, don't you think? In a way, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh
It's
yeah.
very deep and it's very simple.
I think that's one of the ways that you said when you were in town here that Neighbors is carrying on that legacy, and part of that legacy that we pride ourselves in is that deep and simple approach. There's not a lot of bells and whistles or anything like that.
No.
We believe in the simple form of communication, and in times like this, we can use something a little bit complicated, like if you ask me how this video conferencing works, I could not tell you. But what I'm getting out of it is that I get to see my friend David face to face and have a conversation. And I think that that's what we're yearning so much now in our isolation, is to actually just to share that coffee with each other, and to have those conversations, that deep and simpleness. And that's Neighbors style. We're not doing much different.
No, you're right. Yeah, we're doing what Fred Rogers does on television, talking to that one person,
Yeah.
and with very valuable information. I think I'm doing with my answering the letters by longhand is what Fred Rogers is doing in television. It's that direct. He's trying to taking something that's very impersonal, like television. It can be cold.
Mm-hmm.
And warming it up as best as he could, and he did that with his program. He was very successful at it, I think. And children think he's talking to that one person, them, and it's unique. So I think I've learned a lot from Fred. Maybe I don't realize how much I've learned, but I think bringing up my writing by hand, I do. And I think I did learn that from Fred, just trying to be deep and simple, I guess. At least simple.
Well, I've talked to you before. You're pretty deep too. So,
well, I get, but I learned a lot from Fred Rogers. He was and he didn't teach. He didn't teach by saying, "Now here's what you have to learn," and that was not Fred's style. He taught by example and through television, and you can see that.
I think there's something that again that I learned from Fred too, and I think it's actually been very influential in even the way that I preach or pastor, and that is that every single person is to be honored and celebrated, and it's not, when you do that, when you think of people on the same wavelength as you, or the same level as you. Oftentimes we think that people are either above us or that we're above them, and there seems to be like you said, like you almost get into the lecturing mode and stuff. But if we start out on the same plane, we learn together, and that can even be if someone is doing a TV show or preaching or whatever, or having a conversation. We can learn so much by sharing, and sharing means talking and listening. And I think we sometimes forget that, don't you think?
Oh, I think so too. They've asked Fred, what is the most important thing you can do for a child? In one word. And he said, listen. Listening to what a child is saying, or anybody for that matter is saying, just listen. Because, well, you've been through it with you. You have a son. When he was smaller, sometimes he'd come in and want some attention, and you're tempted to keep reading your paper or whatever, but you need to be able to put your paper down, turn the computer off, and listen. You'll find out so much about someone or that child. And that's very wise. That's deep and simple.
Yes.
It's just listening.
What are some things that I realize that the show has been off for a long time, but I also know that you had an influence on many episodes. For instance, going to Russia, and even the addressing of superheroes. I'm well aware that those were a lot of your brainchild on those. If with the current situation, do you think that how what would the neighborhood be saying to kids during this time?
Boy, that'd be hard. That'd be hard to answer. I wonder if Fred would have addressed it at all right away, because kids are hearing so much going on right now. They're hearing it every time you turn the television on. It's some disastrous thing happening, and I just wonder if Fred would have wanted to give him that special time, that half hour with him, and just talking about things that may be helpful and not scary.
Mm.
I don't know. Although he did deal, well, I'll give you an example. We one of our this is not the same thing as being quarantined, but over the years, the letters that came in, the most requested subject from people writing in was, Mr. Rogers, can you talk about divorce that's hit our family, and we'd like to know how to handle this. And it took him 5 years before he wrote a week about divorce. And it was very supportive. And the one thing he wanted children to know, that if that happens in your family, and I'm leaving out a lot of this prep for it, that it's not the child's fault. Children think they're responsible for whatever happens in their family. And I wonder in some ways, if you're bad, children internalize a lot of things. If you're bad, well, does that mean my parents are getting divorced because I'm bad? And I wonder in some ways if all of this, if some children think, oh, I'm bad, maybe that's what's happening. We're being punished. I don't know. So I just wonder if Fred would have dealt with it right away. I think if we were going on, he would, in some way, he would have taken it step by step. But
And you mentioned
one more thing. The one more
Yeah.
thing he would do, I think he would come on and do a PSA of how adults can help their children during times like this, as opposed to putting it into the program. That's probably what he would have done.
I could definitely see that. And when you talk about, with the divorce and kids thinking that it could be their fault, there are a lot of people that their lives have been totally uprooted right now, and they are learning how to work at home and how to coexist at times when they're used to being separated.
Yes.
And I wonder if that stirs up moments of friction or stress. And, and I think that's where your PSA of communication and taking pauses and so forth could be really beneficial, not only for the children's sake, but for even the parents and also just adults living with other adults right now too. Don't you think?
I think the way Fred handled 9/11, he was actually out of town, and he couldn't get back for a couple of days because all the airports were closed and so forth. But when he did come back, he made a PSA. We were still taping at that point, rather than put it into the program. And he made a PSA telling children and families that the people are here to take care of you, help you as best they can. Then he made one for adults saying when he was small, his mother said, look for the helpers, look for the people who are helping. And you can even do that now. Look at these healthcare workers and the people who are giving tests, and right in the front lines, they're in jeopardy of sorts of getting the virus themselves. And they're being the helpers. And I think in some way that helps children understand that there are people out there, doctors and nurses and ESM drivers and whatever, emergency service drivers, helping in this time of need. And I think that's helpful to tell children too. And that's what he told in his 9/11 PSAs. Does that make sense? Am I making sense here?
I think the same message holds up today, to think about the people that are doing the good. It is so hard to turn on a television without hearing the tragedy of this and the bad things. I think that it's important that we take the time to look at the blessings around us. And sometimes those blessings are they're obviously the nurses and the people that are on the front lines of this, risking their lives to help people. I even noticed, I saw people that were the sanitation workers collecting the
Yeah.
trash, the people that have to be out there in this all the time, the delivery drivers. A lot of people are going through, and they're true heroes right now.
And there might be somebody, who knows where, that are they're they have to be home, isolated together, and maybe they're having some sort of a disagreement, marital or something like that, or family disagreement, and maybe this gives them the chance to be together and talk it through. And maybe in some ways this sort of forced isolation would help them. I don't know. I just try to think of how this can help in some ways. Just by chance that they're brought together and maybe are forced in some way to talk about what might be bothering them.
Mhm.
I hope that's the case. I hope that helps in some ways. So I'm trying to look at all the positives that can come out of this.
And I think that that's so important, David. We talk so much about the seriousness, and we all get that. I think we all
Uh,
know that it's a very serious thing, and I
yes,
pray that we all see the seriousness. But we do have to focus on the positive in order to keep ourselves going. I
yes.
think it's hope that keeps us going.
If it brings two people together that were apart, or ideas, or something constructive, that the negatives have helped the positives. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I get you. I'm right
Okay.
there with you too. I
Well,
think that
good.
there are in every single life circumstance there are blessings. We just have
Yes.
to search for them. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it goes back to look for the helpers, look for the
it does.
blessings.
Yeah,
And that is so wise when you think of it. Look for the helpers. And Fred did it through making a PSA. Some people could help on the spot. Fred could use his talents to reach people about look for the helpers. That's how he can. Everybody can help in different ways, I think. And I, I, I hope we're doing that now. But it, it, and I hope politics stays out of it. It doesn't. This, what I hope it does. Now that I think of it, all of this political backbiting that's going on. And, we can agree with a party or not agree with a party. But at this time, I think if we could both work as one unit, if both parties could come together and it's beyond ideology. How do you pronounce that word?
ideology. Not gonna
Yes,
do-
it's beyond that.
ideology.
It's not,
Ideology.
it's not each party's ideology, whatever that is. It's helping each other at this point now. We're into this is a very serious thing we're in. And I think we should realize it's serious, but also try to think of the positives we can bring out of it.